Begin, so I'm turning it over to Brad.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody, and welcome to you online as well. We're going to talk about industry today, and we're going to do this in two parts. We're going to start with the careers overview. We'll talk about what industry is. We'll talk about where industry is, and then take a look at some of the history here of where the industry has come so you get a sense for why we're in a position like we are now, um, and, and how that has rolled forward, particularly over the last several years, into what jobs are available and then how to get those jobs. And that's gets to the second part where we'll talk about the tools, and that's how do you create your industry resume and how do you write a good. So with that, okay, so we start with what do the job postings look like? And you see a tale here that if you look at it just as with what's on that slide, you think, ooh, things don't look very. But what is actually happening is it's a pretty good job market out there. You don't know that because there was a hyper hiring environment in the 21 and 22 timeframe, brought about by COVID and some of the other things. So it has backed off of that. But we are at a level approximately where we were in 2019. And the significance of that is that 2019 was the highest hiring on record until we got to the 21 and 22 timeframe. So it's pretty good out there. The other thing you see there is that in the third quarter of 25, and we won't have the fourth quarter data for another 10, 12 days yet. But in the third quarter of 25, we had the first quarterly increase since the third quarter of 24. And that has brought about a little bit more optimism in what the hiring market is going to look like going forward. Now, the other thing we started tracking back in 2022 was the companies that are laying people off. And not a particularly good story here in 25, but you can see the third quarter is down. And again, looking at the experts are saying layoffs are likely not going to be in 26 what they were in 2025. And it's not just in this industry, by the way. I just read off that Amazon is laying off a bunch of people. UPS is laying off a bunch of people. So it's not just this industry. It's just this is the industry we care most about. Now, when we talk about industry, it's impossible to completely separate industry from the academic world. As I put it up there in the good old days, that is kind of pre-1980, it worked like this. The government funded academic research. They developed the compounds. They were shipped over to pharma companies who developed them and got them on the market. Now that worked pretty well until we got to the late 80s. And the government said, we don't want to be in the scientific funding business anymore. This was with the economic turndown of 1987, 1988. And pharma said, well, we can fund that academic research. And that started to work pretty well as well. However, the pharma companies thought that if they were funding this research, they should have a say in how it came out. You may have heard of the product Vioxx that was funded by Merck, and not all of the research data got into the studies that led to that product approval, and it was hence taken off the market. As we got to the 2000s, we had another source of funding. We had private funding that was there. And that was essentially from the tech finance people. They said, we've been very successful funding tech projects. We can do biotech as well. And that worked until we got to about 2008 and we had the tech bubble. And we went through a period where we're quite sure where this funding was going to come from. But as we got to the 2020s, we're now VCs, the venture capital people have picked up the funding, and all is right with the world. So that is working right now. So today we'll talk about what industry is and where it is, at least in this country. We'll look at industry employment. Where are the jobs and what are the jobs that are out there for you to take a look at? And then the job packages, which is how do you create your resume and your cover and write a good cover letter. So let's get into the industry overview. What is it? I've used a pretty broad description here. So it's pharma biotech manufacturers, device, service providers, consumables, health insurers, venture capital, and government agencies. I've used this broad definition because the process you go through to get a job in any one of those areas is very similar and very different to what it is in the academic world. Where is it? Biotech is bi-coastal in this country. On the East Coast, starting out in the RTP area, North Carolina, here in Maryland, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, and Boston. And on the West Coast, San Diego, LA, Orange County, the Bay Area, and Seattle. You are actually sitting in the third largest biotech hub in the United States. Whenever you talk about industry, you got to talk about revenues, right? So in 2024, and that's the latest data that we have, by the way, revenues, pharmaceutical industry, you see biotech, which is just slightly behind it, medical device, contract research organizations, and life sciences tools and reagents. In total, it's a little over 4.1 trillion US dollars. Now, the question always comes up when I show this slide, what's the difference between pharma and biotech? Well, it used to be that pharma developed small molecules and biotech developed biologics. However, in today's world, that tends to be a little bit more mishmash, and there really isn't a clear difference. You can see there as you look at the projected growth by 2030 that biotech is growing almost twice as fast as the pharma. So if we look at it, revenues, we'll put it together and say, let's look at pharma and biotech, and it's about 3.3 trillion of the 4.1 trillion that we showed on that original slide. Where is it? About half of the world comes from North America. The emerging markets are growing very rapidly, and then Europe and the rest of the world. And you see growth rates, and this chart has changed dramatically over the last 3 or 4 years. The growth rate in Europe and North America was down below 2% about 3 years ago. So it has grown dramatically. The top 10 companies, and again, we're looking at 2024 because we don't have the 25 numbers yet. And what's interesting, you can see J&J, which is the largest company in the world, the largest pharma company in the world, just under $90 billion. down through Sanofi, which is about $50 billion. Either one of those are still pretty big numbers. What tends to happen here, these 10 companies tend to be the same year over year. The order that they appear in this chart tends to change a little bit. Have to get out. Blossoms here. The lifeblood of these companies is research and development. And here you can see the research and development companies of these top 10 from about $20+ billion down to a little over about $7 or $8 billion. And that's an annual figure. And then you see this is a percent of revenues that they are investing in R&D. And that goes from a low of about 17-18% up to almost 30% of the revenues. There we go. Now, the thing that you're most concerned about is employment. How many people work there? Well, you can see in 2016, it was just under 3 million people. This is global. In 2020, that grew to about 4.5 million. And by 24, we're at about 7 million. So you can see the rapid growth that took place during the pandemic. Now, we said we'd give you a little history lesson here. So kind of what has happened through the years. And we'll then try to look at how that has impacted where we are. Well, the roots of the pharmaceutical industry go way back to the apothecaries and the pharmacies from the Middle Ages that offered kind of traditional remedies. The pharmaceutical industry, as we know it, grew out of the chemicals and dye businesses, mainly in Europe. Merck in Darmstadt, Germany, began manufacturing and selling alkaloids in 1827. Edward Robinson Squibb established his lab in 1858. Pfizer provided Union Army treatments during the U.S. Civil War, and Colonel Eli Lilly established his lab in Indianapolis in 1876. The first true pharmaceutical product was created by the German company Bayer, which we call now Bayer, in the early 1900s. Anybody know what that was? Anybody online?
Aspirin.
Aspirin, yep. There it is. And we still use, that is, thank you so much. You're welcome so much. And the first life-saving treatment here at NIH was brought to you. Thank you.
You get brownie point for sure.
Yep. Here's just some of the advances that have come from the industry throughout the years. I started in the 1940s with penicillin, up through the psychotropic agents, the anti-anxiety, the GI agents in the 1970s. 1980s, the anti-tissue rejection products. Cholesterol and hypertension in the 90s, targeted cancer therapy in the 2000s, immunotherapy in the 2010, and most recently it's the RNA vaccines. And you think about what kind of a world we would be if we didn't have those advances. Now, the market has changed dramatically over the last 40 or 50 years. Pre-1980, the market looked like this. The patient got sick. He went to the physician who wrote a prescription. And when I mean wrote a prescription, he had a little pad and he wrote that prescription out. And the patient hand carried it to the pharmacy. The pharmacy filled it and the insurer paid for it. It was a kinder, gentler marketplace at that point. But as we got later on, there became a number as we got to pharmacy benefit managers, managed care plans, and things like that. There became a lot of barriers between the physician and the patient, the payer and the physician, the patient and the payer, and then the pharmacy gets caught in the middle. Now, interestingly enough, as these things started going into place in the early 80s, the pharmaceutical industry kept doing business as they had since the early 1900s. And it was an industry that didn't make much news at that time. So it was kind of like almost a cottage industry. The strategies were a search for blockbuster products. Blockbuster products, a product that sells more than $1 million a year. So that led to large and diverse R&D organizations, active in-licensing organizations, and mega marketing and sales organizations and budgets. It led to a consolidation of industry, of companies, and we talked about how they funded research, or they funded discovery products. That's where this money came from. So leading up to 2007, between 1995 and 2008, R&D costs grew at an annual rate in excess of 30% a year. The FDA new chemical entity approvals dropped from 47 in 1995 to 18 in 2007. Annual prescription growth went from 12% to just under 2%. And heightened competition required larger marketing and sales staffs and promotional budgets, and industry consolidation created mega companies. Now, what do I mean by these mega companies? We know Pfizer, right? In 1953, they bought a company called Rohrig. In 2002, they bought Warner Lambert, which had purchased Parke-Davis 20 years before that. In 2002, they bought Pharmacia, which had combined with Upjohn and purchased Cyril. And in 2009, they bought Wyeth, which had merged with Ayers to be called American Home Products in the early 2000s, A.H. Robbins in 1988, and Letterly Labs in 1994. So you can see that all of these companies had R&D sites, they had sales and marketing sites, and now what do you do? So what do you do with them? In fact, one of the things for us old pharma guys to do when we get together is talk about companies like this that no longer exist. So they faced kind of what was known as the perfect storm. Years of diminishing return on both R&D and marketing, bloated R&D organizations, outmoded strategies for product development and marketing, and then they were facing what became known as the product cliff, the patent cliff. Do you know what that was? Well, that is between 2013 and 2016, products that totaled about $50 billion a year in sales went off patent. So they became eligible for generic competition. So we had all of this happening. And oh, by the way, we start talking a lot about healthcare costs as we get into the 2000s. Now, we do that because in 2024, again, the latest figures we have, that is $4.8 trillion. And I put all those zeros on there so you can see what $1 trillion look like. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, as you look at prescription drugs, which is the blue area right here, has been somewhere between about 10 and 13% of that total, and that's been fairly common since the 1960s. But the thing that drives this is that in 1980, the total cost of our healthcare was $234 billion. And that represented about 4% of our gross national product. In 2000, and that should be 24, that's $4.8 trillion, and it's a little over 16% of the gross domestic product. So yeah, it's something that we have to do. But you can also see that if we just attack pharmaceuticals, that's a pretty small part of it. So we had the perfect storm, all of this happening. And in 2008, the economic situation exposed a pharmaceutical industry business model that was broken. It no longer worked. What worked 20 years ago no longer works now. So what did the companies do? Well, between 2007 and 2012, pharma and biotech lost about 500,000 jobs. Now, to put that in perspective, during that same period, the U.S. automobile industry lost about 250,000 jobs. And the U.S. government bailed out Chrysler and General Motors. And you didn't hear any talk about a bailout for Pfizer or Merck or any of those companies, did you? And unlike the past, the turndown went across the board, so including the areas of R&D. But overall, industry employment was down just under 6%. How's that possible? How's that possible? We lost all those jobs, and yet the employment's down only 6%. And the reason is most of those job losses were with the big companies. Remember the mega companies like I showed you. These are new startups, young companies, smaller companies that maintain the hiring throughout that period. So what did the industry do? Well, first and foremost, they downsized. They switched strategies from that blockbuster strategy that we talked about to a market opportunity strategy. They initiated strategies to reduce both R&D and marketing costs, and they adopted a priority for acquiring technologies over companies. And they prioritized the development of biologics over small molecules. So now as we move into the present day, the development of biologics has far outpaced small molecule development. Increased collaboration between industry and academic labs. And nowhere is that more evident than in the development of the Moderna vaccines, Spikevax. Explosion of cell and gene therapy technologies, and especially in the areas of oncology, and then focus on infectious disease and vaccine, particularly 2020 and beyond. what's going to happen going forward? The development of new technologies will continue to drive industry hiring. As long as companies are innovative, they will continue to hire. Management opportunities and strategies to hire and manage remote workforces. This is an interesting thing. Remote workforces really blossomed during the pandemic. Now they've kind of pulled back and we're trying to figure out how to manage it. And there's increased badging and credential programs. Companies are have figured out they really may not need people with 4-year degrees all the time. And it's greater opportunities for STEM graduates. Excuse me. So what kinds of jobs are there in pharma and biotech? Next section is going to come from this book. Whether you can see that online or not. Okay.
I'll send it in the recap.
This is like my Bible, and if you can see in here, it's kind of dog-eared because it gets a lot of use. What the book does is describes virtually every position in pharma and biotech. It's one I recommend because a lot of people come to me and they say, I want to go into the industry. And I say, what do you want to do? And they say, I don't know. This is a great place to start because this has everything. And it describes what is the background they would look for to hire into that position. So education and experience. What do people do on a day-to-day basis that do these jobs? And what might these jobs set you up for in terms of future movement? And you'll see by the thickness of the book, it's a much broader array of positions available in industry than there is in the academic world. And so when I recommend this, people tend to find 2 or 3 jobs that they had no idea even existed. And they think those might be pretty cool to do. So let's take a look. Well, there's opportunities in R&D, and that's discovery research, preclinical, clinical, project management, and biopharm product development. There's commercial opportunities, sales, marketing, business development, and corporate communications. There's areas between marketing and the R&D, which is regulatory, medical affairs, and product support. There's areas in operations, bio IT, manufacturing, quality. And then there's a whole separate section on services. These are agencies. So anything that a company can do, there's probably a consulting agency that will do it too. And there's opportunities in those areas as well, including recruiting, contract organizations, consulting, that kind of thing. So if I can here, go, take a look. So we'll take a look at these. We talked about what these are. You can see as we listed there, these are mostly advanced education positions, PhD, MD, PharmD type positions. And I want to highlight the preclinical research. Okay, so you see they're identifying, synthesizing, and characterizing new drugs. So what's that mean? There, they do that. That includes metabolism, pharmacokinetics, tox, drug safety, evaluation, pathology, pharmacology, translational research, medicine, and animal services, chemistry, and manufacturing and controls. I highlight that because if you're a postdoc here at NIH, you're probably doing one or most of those things. So this is the easiest transition to make into industry. Me? We talked about commercial. There are opportunities for PhDs in commercial. When I worked for Novartis, the brand director of one of the products that we had was a PhD. Now, what happened was he was involved in the development of that compound as it came through the development cycles and then went on in marketing. But you can see most times these are bachelor, master's degree programs or positions. Here's the areas between product support. These are the inside guys that will answer questions for physicians that write in. There's medical affairs who are out working with the research faculty, and regulatory affairs. These two are generally advanced degrees positions. Operations, and one of the interesting ones now is manufacturing, because the manufacturing of biologics has completely changed how products are manufactured. And so there's a much more scientific bent to the manufacturing in the industry than there ever was before. When Novartis was merged between Ciba-Geigy and Sandoz, I got a chance to go up and see one of the main manufacturing sites for Novartis. And I would describe it as the Jolly Green Giant's kitchen. It had these great big mixing containers that were probably 300 or 400 gallons big. And these big mixers that looked like the electric mixer in your kitchen, but just like hundreds of times bigger. That's no longer the case. And then we talked about the services, and this can really be anything. So these are anything from bachelor level to advanced degree. And we'll take a look at that as we look at it by degree. We said the commercial operations are basically bachelor masters. These are the between areas are mainly PhD and MD level. The R&D, mainly PhD, MD level, with some technician opportunities for the master level. And then the manufacturing, again, that's basically bachelor's, master's. And this one, because it really can be anything, is pretty much across the board. So I wanted to just take an opportunity here to look at a job ad. Don't apply for this one because I kind of mocked it up here. Okay. But I want to show you how to read one of these things. What do you look for and what do you not look for? Okay. What you look for is the responsibilities. So take a look at that. And if you have experience in these kinds of things, then it is for you. All right. And just another one, so you can take a look at that. But key here is, what don't you pay attention to? Don't pay attention to the position title, because there is no consistency across the industry as to what they call these positions. Now, sometimes they're research scientists, sometimes they're research associates, sometimes they're, give me another one, research they're scientist 1, 2, 3, so they call them all kinds of things. Pay attention to these things. So where are these likely to be? Well, the research positions predominantly in the biotech and early stage. They're the ones that are discovering these compounds. The development, they're in the bigger companies. They're the ones that take it through the development cycles to move it toward market. Business development, well, there's out licensing opportunities in the small companies with the new technologies, trying to get a bigger company interested. And then there's in licensing opportunities in those larger companies looking for good compounds. Medical affairs, those are the larger products that are the larger companies that have products ready to launch or on the market. Regulatory affairs, same kind of thing. Product support, larger companies, again, and then management consulting, that goes across the board. Oh, I know, I didn't push that. I have to point at it.
Mhm.
Here are just some examples of companies that you can look from the mega down to the early stage and startup and pharmaceutical, biotech, device, consumables, contract organizations. So with that, we finished the first part. Are there any questions? Maybe you can look on.
One quick one from the chat. Is there a place we can access previous OITE trainings? Yes, we have a YouTube channel. I'll send that in the recap as well, but if you look for OITE on YouTube, you can find recordings of a lot of our past workshops. Related to the layoffs recently in biotech, are these layoffs due to AI implementation? And what's causing this wave of layoffs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the good news in the answer to that is that there's not one thing that's causing that. It tends to be company specific. Either the company decides to stop development of a particular compound. They say, well, we're going to change direction or something like that. But there's not any one kind of thing like there was back in the 2007, 2008 timeframe that's causing that. Any questions from?
Yeah, I did. So I know when you're talking about looking at the research posting, responsibilities and the qualifications. I mean, I've heard that most of the time, like, you're not gonna get like 100% match in terms of having experience and like every single thing that they want. Like, do you have like an idea, like what's the rough thing to shoot for, like 50 to 70, something like that? I mean,
Yeah, I firmly believe that when those HR people put those together, they never ever think they're going to find somebody that has every one of those.
Okay.
All right. So, and there's no like real percentage,
Yeah.
but if you hit 50, 60%, yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of my advice is if that ad catches your eye with something that's in there, then
Let's go for it.
Yeah. Don't eliminate yourself.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, one quick question. A piece of information that really attracted my attention is when you mention that companies are usually looking to substitute like a PhD for a 4-year degree or a STEM undergrad. In your opinion, based on your opinion, is that something that's static over time or that's
and let me be clear. They're not actually substituting bachelor's degrees with PhDs. All right. Those are two different jobs that they're looking for.
okay?
But companies are beginning to realize that they don't need to hire somebody with a 4-year degree. They could hire somebody with an associate's degree or even maybe a high school diploma. And that's in the manufacturing areas, the more what I say, physical areas of the company where that's happening. Okay,
Another good one, since the job title isn't helpful itself, how do you filter for specific job responsibilities when searching on job sites like Indeed or LinkedIn?
okay. Yeah, you do have to search on some of those job titles to get you up there. So search on scientist one, scientist two, scientist three, research associate, research scientist. Search on those kinds of jobs, but don't pay any attention to them.
And if you could search by keyword instead of by job title, even just put in your research specialty. So put in,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
T
another
cell,
good way.
put in cancer biology, like whatever your specialty is, just put in the very big picture overview of it, and you might have better chances of finding good matching descriptions. I got a couple more in here. Yep.
There's more.
How would day-to-day work differ for a staff scientist like here at NIH versus working in industry science? This is specifically to mega companies, the large
Okay,
company.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You won't notice a difference.
Yep.
You won't notice a difference. Now, there's a difference in the context. Okay? Here at NIH, you're looking to advance science, you're looking to publish your work. In industry, you're looking to create a product, to treat a disease. So the context is a little bit different, but especially in those areas that I circled, you'll hardly notice a difference.
There's a bunch of questions related to resumes, which is perfect because that's the next section. So I'm going to hold off on asking those for the moment. We may answer some of those in the next section of Brad's talk.
Okay. So we'll start with resumes. They are based on the job itself. Okay. Now, let's be clear. You should tailor your resume to specific jobs. That doesn't mean you need to rewrite your resume for every job. It means you may change a half a dozen words. You may change the order how you rank your skills in there. So it's things like that, but they are guaranteed. You do want to specifically tailor them, gear them for specific jobs. It's not the place for your life history. It needs to be based on the job. Generally reversed, and particularly in this industry, it's ordered in reverse chronological order, starting with what you do now and go backwards. And the most important thing, when people meet with me, the most important thing we talk about is accomplishments and results in your resume. Talk about the significance of your work. Why does it matter? What do we know now that we didn't know before? So focus on those kinds of things. Doesn't necessarily need to be scientific, should be work related. Okay? And think of your resume as a selling document. When people start to work with me, when they work with me as on one-on-ones, we're working for a job, I tell them, you are no longer a scientist, you are a sales rep. And you are selling the most important thing there is to you. You. So think of it that way. The analogy I like to use in resumes is if you ever walked into a new car showroom, they have those little brochures for each of the models that they have. And you can bet that there's one of those in there with a red convertible. And the whole science around that is they want you to pick that up and say, I can see myself driving that car. That's the way you want to think about your resume. You want to remember when you send that in, they don't know you. They've never seen you. You want them to look at that and say, I want this red convertible. Maybe not when it's 19 degrees out. Sections, we got your contact information. And contact information, pretty simple. Phone number, email, link to your LinkedIn profile. Don't even need a physical address anymore. Your expertise summary. This is the easiest place in the resume to match the job responsibilities. Your summary of accomplishments, remember we said those accomplishments are very important, and your professional experience. Starting with here at NIH, moving backwards. Your education, your skills, your leadership, funding, your honors, your service, publications, patents, and generally not posters, these are publications, invited talks, and references generally don't go in there. You want to have those ready, but you don't need to put them in your resume. So let's talk a little bit about that. We talked about this expertise summary. It's for resumes only, and it's the first and easiest place to adjust to the ad. Now you have to remember that a company will hire you based on your experience doing the responsibilities of the job. And this is where you have the first opportunity to show them that. So what we see oftentimes is looking as that. Seeking a position in industry. That's stupid. If you sent your resume, somebody can probably figure that out. All right? So don't do that. Something like this. Okay? Couple of things. You see protein biochemist with 10 years experience. And then you look at quantifiable things down through here. 2 years experience in RNA biology, 6 years experience in this. So be as quantifiable as you can, and bullet points are a good method here. And by the way, if you want to take a look at a good resume, there's one in this book. Four to six bullets, there's no magic number here, whatever fits. And then the summary of accomplishments focuses on the results and applications of your work. If there's anything you get out of this lecture today, focus on your results and your accomplishments. Right? And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Okay? You have to think through, how do you do that? Because a lot of the work you do here at NIH is not really quantifiable. So how do you measure those, or how do you talk about those results? So I'll give you some examples here. Okay. Identified regulatory T cells as a diagnostic biomarker in experimental graft versus host disease with implications for improved clinical treatment. It's that with implications for improved clinical treatment, that's turns it into an accomplishment. Why is it important? Yeah, well, we can run around stirring T cells, but if it leads to a treatment, that's important. And again, identified markers with potential to be used to target cancer stem cells with metastatic and drug-resistant properties. Now, we talked about your resume may change depending on what kind of job you're looking for. So here's just an example of the same kind of accomplishment, one for research and development, one for project management. So the accomplishment there is resulted in $3.5 million of new funding. And in collaboration with regulatory affairs, documents were completed 6 weeks ahead of schedule. And same accomplishment, or the same work described in different ways. And just a couple more here without trying to belabor the point. Industry supervisory position responsible for hiring. Explore program mentored undergraduates. Effectively communicated and transferred complex technical information, and for project management, empowered the staff to meet the standards. Again, it's the same work, but you're describing it in a different way. Now, you're a professional experience, and in your resume, you may have that separate section that says summary of accomplishments, or you may just put those accomplishments right into your work experience. And there's no right or wrong way to do that. So you talk about your job title, what your role is, and a good way to do this, to state that is I do X to understand Y. That helps you with that accomplishment. Let's do it. Okay. And like I said, this could be a more detailed version of your summary of accomplishments, or your accomplishments might be in there. Your advisor, generally not. Two exceptions to that. One, if your advisor is a Nobel caliber researcher, you probably want to put that person's name in there. More often what happens is your advisor may have a contact in the company that you're applying to, and then you're going to want to make sure you mention it there. Education, graduate school through undergraduate. Postdoc shouldn't be here. That should be part of your work experience. Right. And when you list your PhD school, this is where you list the school and the degree. The work that you've done during your PhD would be listed in your work experience. Okay. The additional training, generally not, and including FAS, FAES, and OITE programs. And OITE programs are really, really, really good. I know they are. There's no place for them here. Skills and techniques. And if you've looked at job ads before, there's two major sections. One is the job responsibilities, where we try to match that in the first section. And then there's the skills that are going to be required to do that job. And so that's why you want to make sure that's here. And you want to make sure you match the wording of the skills as you list them to how the company lists them. And it's generally a good idea to organize them into common headers. It makes it a little easier for the person that's doing the reading to find what he or she may be looking. And then other sections on there: team, communication, collaboration, all of those things as you have room. Okay. And your resume should be at your level of experience here. It should be between about 2.5 and 3 pages. I don't recommend going over 3. So in team skills, we generally see nothing. What you could put is something like this. And again, focus on bullet points. I'm going to make it through the talk now. All right, so just some suggestion for improving your document. As I said before, reverse chronological order, start where you are now and work backwards. Be specific and avoid jargon and acronyms. Okay, NIH is usually okay, but NIDDK, nobody knows what that what alphabet soup is.
Mhm.
So you want to write that out. Job AdWords, use those where you can to match what you've done. Focus on results. Use action-packed verbs. Okay? Assisted, not good. Led, much better. If you're looking for that here at here at OITE, we have a 2-page document, I think, that lists action-packed words, action-packed verbs. I call them resume verbs. So it's just it's a great thing to have.
Yeah, look for the OITE guide to CVs and resumes, and it's inside of that resume guide.
Spelling and proofreading. Make sure you go over your document. Okay? As somebody who's hired a lot of people in the past, if I see errors on the document, it gets thrown out. And organization and white space. You want to make the document look like it's not crowded. Put your name and a page number on each page. Okay, if you have 3 pages, you should have your name and your page number on each one. Why is that? That's because most times when you send a resume in, it gets printed to be circulated. And if they pull 2 of the 3 pages off, they're missing a big part of what your experience is. Your name in the file. You don't know how many resumes I've looked at that the title of the document is resume. What's your name in there? Date of the last update is a good thing to do too, okay? And even if you don't update it, change the date. Bring that up to date. I usually name mine B. Fackler 1Q26. So by the quarter. And if I don't send it in the first quarter, I change it. 2Q26. PDF versus Word documents, if you're sending it in or if you're uploading it into a form, a company's form, use the PDF, not the Word document. When you send it via email, if you send it from a PC and it's read by a Mac, it can change the formatting all over the place, and you may end up with a 12-page document. So send it via PDF. You know, we said leave lots of white space. So one of the tricks is, okay, I'll use an 8 font and then I can put a bit more in there and still have white space. No, don't do that. You want 11 or 12. You want to make it easy to read. Margins should be an inch. We talked about the white space, so keep the margins big. Bolding text can highlight, just don't overdo it. Okay. And the same thing with bullets and lines. Bullets, yeah, use those. That helps you be more concise. It makes it a little easier to read. All right. Lines are good because they can separate areas, but again, not too much, because they can make it look crowded. And plenty of white spaces. We're talking about that. I said that multiple times. So, tell me what's the biggest mistake, the number one resume mistake? Anybody online? Typos. All right. Make sure you have multiple people read your document. I don't know how many documents I've done. And in fact, this presentation, I found an error in it today, and I've given this thing once a year for the last 10 years. So now cover letters. Are there any questions on resumes? Or maybe I tell you what, let's cover cover letters, and then we'll open it up to questions for both of us, okay? First question is, do you need a cover letter? The answer to that question has changed over the last 3 or 4 years. And the answer is, it depends. Many companies have gone to the online system for applications and they don't provide a space for cover letters. If there's no space, that tells you they don't want one. If there is space provided, and sometimes it will say, do you want to upload additional documents? So if they give you an option, I recommend the cover letter. So what are the contents? How you found the job, that helps the company, by the way. Some basic information on yourself. Include any company context that you have. Who do you know there? And say something nice about the organization. It's important for me to work for a company that is known as, and just a simple statement. Part 2, why are you interested in the position and the employer, and how do you best fit? That you take your accomplishments from your resume and you put them right in there without the bullet points. And match the job ad wherever you can. You're interested in interviewing. You're interested in taking the next step, whatever that step may be. Thank them for their consideration and put the onus on yourself to follow up. Don't wait for them to feel free to call me. No, I will check back with you in. And homework is on the 2. Who do you send it to? And if you can, get the name and the degree of the hiring manager. Now, reality being what it is, especially with big companies, they make that very difficult to find out. And so in that case, dear hiring manager is fine. What you don't want to do is address it to Mr. or Ms. So-and-so, and that person happens to be a PhD. Dear doctor. So here is a pretty good cover letter. I'm going to leave it up there for just a few minutes so you can read it.
And you will have the slides afterwards as well.
Yep. And so you can read this. Okay. So does anybody see in there what's good about this? Give me something that you see that's good about this.
They mention a contact.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, they do. Marlene Belford, and then on down to Paul Riggs. Yep. Yep. What else might you?
Yeah, we're not seeing admin.
Well, let's put it up there. Okay. Collaborations. Here you talk about your experience in the areas of the job. Okay. DNA, RNA, protein biochemistry, and the follow-up. I will contact you by X. Now, it's not a perfect one. What do you see? What do you see in there that could make it just a little bit better?
There's a typo.
Oh, is there a typo?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got 2 typos in this. Okay, that's one. Where's the typo?
It says at the bottom of the big yellow box, the use of new system to monitor the fidelity. It should be the use of a new system or new systems.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there's another thing in here. Okay, anybody see anything else that would make it better?
The spacing. Yeah, that's probably just a product of having to cram it onto a single slide.
Yeah, it wouldn't be spaced like this, but you're right.
But yes. Mhm.
I had to glom it together to make it fit, but yes. Yeah,
Oh, feel free to contact me anytime, or,
okay. Yeah,
I will
they
contact-
did say that, but they did say
Yeah,
I
yeah.
will contact you, so.
Mhm.
How about that? Dear hiring manager.
Uh,
All right. Now, if you knew Marlene Belfort and Paul Riggs, a simple call to one or both of them might have said, who's hiring for this? So some final words on cover letters. Never, 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 never more than one page. And that includes the salutation and your signature lines. Most effective when you can address it to the hiring manager by name and degree and say something nice about the company. Where do you find that? Go to the company's website. On their homepage, they'll tell you how they want you to view their company. And you tell them back how you view their company. Focus your experience and accomplishments that are most relevant for the job. And once you've done a good job with that on your resume, to transfer those to a cover letter is pretty easy. And again, keywords. So, what do you need to do now? Well, you want to continue building your scientific reputation. Begin to explore industries, companies, positions that you might be interested in. And enhance your network of contacts. Probably the most important thing is you can do that. And that is, you need to make contacts with people in industry, so outside of the NIH. And we do a program like this on networking. We'll talk about that.
I believe that one's February, March.
And create your industry resume. And if you need help with that, make an appointment with me, make an appointment with one of our career counselors. They can help you with that. And it's oftentimes good to have a good copy of your resume, because as you start networking with people, oftentimes those conversations end with, well, show me a copy of your resume. So you want to have that ready. So what are some resources? You can email me. There's the website to set on a one-on-one appointment with me or any of the career counselors. Resources, we talked about the YouTube, we talked about the guides to resume and cover letter, action verbs, industry events and programs, all on the OITE website. The book, get a copy. I think we have copies here in our library. These books do have a way of getting checked out and not getting checked back in. But I think we do have them, so you can get them. If not, they're on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. It's about $35. Salary benchmarks. So if you're looking at a particular position, what's it pay? The online sites are pretty good. Glassdoor, Salary Wizard. You just have to be careful with those because oftentimes the range that they have in there is a lot broader than what it actually is. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, it's self-collected data, self-reported data. But number two, they don't account for tenure. So if somebody's been doing a particular job for 10 years, they're going to be making more than somebody that's been doing it for a year or two. Informational interviews, talking to people, is probably the most accurate way to do that. And transition issues, I didn't take that out, even though the OITE or the alumni database is not up and running yet, but we think it will be this year. It's a good resource to find people. If you find people in companies that you're interested in that have a background at NIH, you have something in common with them. And often, and while this is not up and running, if you use LinkedIn and search for people, search for a job title in NIH. So search for both of those, and you'll find people doing those jobs that have spent time here in this lovely cocoon. And with that, we will take more questions.
The alumni database, I thought there used to be one, is it now?
There used to be one.
It's been
Rebuilding it.
completely redone and rebuilt. Yep.
Yeah, it's being rebuilt, and it's a great resource. So,
Question online again about the recording. Yes, everyone will get a copy of the recording and the slides afterwards.
hopefully they'll take the coughing out.
Yes, we'll do what we can. Okay. Yeah. Question online. I was told repeatedly that resume should be 2 pages maximum. Has this expectation shifted?
No, having a 2-page resume is not bad. But if you're a postdoc particularly, now if you're a postbac, yeah, a 2-page, do a 2-page. But if you're a postdoc, at your level of experience, you can go a little over 2 pages.
Do you have any, I know there's a networking focused seminar, but do you have any like quick advice for getting started or like improving networking?
Yeah, and the place to start is where you are. Start with your lab. Do they know people in industry? And then you start building out from there. You may know people that you went to school with that are in industry. That's a good place to start. And again, you have that common denominator. Hey, we went to university. Okay.
Radical connections are a great place to start.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best way to start. And then when you start having those conversations, it's always good to ask, who else might you recommend I talk to?
Ooh, this is a good one. For physicians looking for industry jobs, is there a similar job portal? They listed a couple different portals that clinical jobs have, or do you just recommend LinkedIn?
There's a couple. LinkedIn is not bad. Of all the sites out there, that's probably one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the bioorganization local organizations. So most of the top biotech hubs will have one. Mass Bio is an example. So go to those. Those have oftentimes job sites. They'll list companies. They'll also generally have networking opportunities as well.
This is an interesting one. How do you handle being overqualified for a position? Should you trim your resume to come across as like less overqualified?
My advice is if you're overqualified, don't apply for that position. Okay. If it's a position that calls for a master's degree and you have a PhD, you're pretty much wasting your time if you're applying for those. Now some may say master's degree and 6 years experience, PhD and 3 years experience. Those are okay. But my advice is if you're overqualified for the position, don't apply.
In terms of finding the job postings, of course, there's like the sites like Indeed and, LinkedIn and stuff. And you mentioned like the local thing, like the Mass Bio. Are there any other sources like sometimes like will there occasionally be postings like on the company's website that won't show us at all those other places?
Yes, yeah, and that's a very good point because you should look for multiple look at multiple places for
Yeah, okay.
those things, because sometimes they get posted one place and they're not somewhere else. Okay? Here in Maryland, we have a great resource for you, at the Maryland Department of Commerce. They have a life sciences directory. That's a searchable database of every life science company in the state of Maryland. There's about 2,700 of them. And they're also, and not in that section, but in another section on that website, there is a job board. So that is for local here in Maryland. Yes.
And is it the norm that most, I don't know if that's correct information, but it seems that most industrial position requires you to have some postdoctoral experience. So
Not really, okay? If somebody is with a postdoc or a couple of years of postdoc is applying to the same position as you are, the only benefit they'll have is additional experience. So the fact that they did a postdoc versus not a postdoc really doesn't matter.
but how do they perceive that in the industry in terms of the hiring
Yeah,
process?
most, if not all, industry positions, particularly the ones we talked about, will not require a postdoc.
One question, assuming you're at the postdoc level, when do you put in early experiences such as summer internships on a resume, given that you have limited space?
Yeah, that's a good one. I can be my consultant best there. It depends.
Yep.
Okay, and it depends on a number of factors, how you've listed everything, what the overall length of the resume is. Set an appointment with me and we'll go through it.
Yep, that is a perfect question for Brad or one of the other
That's
career
right.
advisors. So absolutely book an appointment with them. We are happy to work with you to figure out where everything fits on your resume. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one quick question. So in terms of building up your resume, how is it perceived? For example, if after your graduate school, you take a year off to travel, and then when you're applying, you have like a year that you basically didn't do anything. So how do you report that? Does it matter?
How do you fill in the gap here?
Yeah, that's, and you would do it the same way you would do it any other place. Yep. You would want to turn that into an accomplishment.
Oh, I ain't doing nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you can do that. You can do that.
Like other things, so like my research area, both in my PhD and here, is a little bit more like kind of on the fundamental side, specifically like molecular biophysics and single molecule biophysics. Now for like the skills and accomplishments, when I do have some things that are common, like I've done a little bit of protein purification here, and I do confocal fluorescence microscopy, but a lot of the things I've done are pretty niche. Like, okay, my PhD was in single molecule optical tweezers. How do I avoid that hurting? Like, because I know like they had the filters and stuff like that. Because I mean, I know people with single molecule backgrounds that, I mean, there's some companies that do a little bit of single molecule stuff, but more often they'll go into like the tool developments, like some of the DNA or protein sequencing companies and stuff like that. Like,
Oftentimes, and this happens with a number of people that I work with, okay? They have a set of experiences like you do, geared at, we'll call it single molecule.
mhm.
Right? So what you have to do is in your resume, you'll have to translate that for the person that's reading it. I did these things, I have these skills and did
Right.
these things for this, but these skills and this thing also
I
lead
gotcha.
to here. And I call that translation.
I see.
So
Yeah.
that's what.
Yeah, so like for the optical tweezers, I could say I worked with a custom built laser or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a good place for cover letters as well.
Yeah.
The good, a good, you can cover that in your cover letter.
Okay.
Do agents like Kelly Scientific, are they helpful for looking for a job as a postdoc? So recruiters and other agencies like that, should you be looking for recruiters?
Yeah, one of the things that I said, and I'm gonna go kind of around the mulberry bush to answer this question. One of the things that I said, is when you list your resume, as it gets to 2Q26, change the title. Okay? If you have your resume in LinkedIn, that oftentimes will, spur a tickler in a recruiter's file. Oh, new resume. Okay, so it's a little trick. So you'll see as you're looking for a job, part of this is kind of scientific, part of this is playing the game. And that's a way to play the game. Now, let me get to recruiters. Are they helpful? Yes. Okay. You need to know about recruiters. And that is, recruiters do not work for you, they work for companies. The benefits of recruiters is they can get your resume more broadly distributed than you may be able to do by yourself. As long as you know that if they have 5 people that fit that job requirement, they'll send all 5 of those into the company. And as long as one of them gets the job, they get paid. But yes, recruiters can be helpful. And Kelly, for here at NIH and I guess in the entire federal government, yeah, that's a viable way to get a job as well.
Mhm. Just curious what your thoughts are. Does being a postdoc at NIH really help when looking for industry jobs?
Does a postdoc at NIH help in, I would say this, working at the NIH is a credential.
Yeah.
And you should optimize that credential. So the answer is yes. The answer would not be because you work at NIH, you will automatically get jobs.
There's a couple different questions in the chat and the Q&A about visa status, international scientists. Putting out there that both Brad and I are not visa experts, so we will not comment on them in detail today. We'll just say that if you are an international scientist looking for industry jobs in the US, start early and talk to DIS as soon as possible if you're an NIH fellow. They will give you the best idea of what the current landscape is, what your timeline should look like. So as soon as you're thinking of applying for jobs, well in advance of a year possible, talk to DIS. They will be your best resource to really help navigate that process. They also have drop-in office hours Monday through Thursday online, so it is very easy to get a hold of them and meet with them. So yeah, talk to DIS. They're your best friends.
Yes.
Regarding part 2 of cover letters, is it wise to simply restate the experiences that you have listed on your resume?
Yeah, you don't want them to look redundant.
Mhm.
You will be using those same statements, but because you're going to be using them in a little different context, they will probably look a little bit differently. So just keep that in mind.
Another question, have we seen any recent cases of government contractor positions? Are they still being posted? They are very rare right now. They're extremely hard to come by. Not zero, but extremely hard to come by. Any other questions online, in person?
This is a good group. They know
is.
that at 3:30 we're supposed to end. And look at that. They are good.
They're on it.
They are good.
One more quick question. Do you have any suggestions for bachelor level biotech jobs? So if you're bachelor level, what should you be looking for?
Yeah, again, you want to look at the experience and the job qualifications.
Yep.
You just want to, instead of looking for PhD, you want to look at bachelor level positions.
Mhm.
The process that you would go through, what your resume will look like, is exactly what we talked about today.
Yep, exactly the same for degree type. Huge thank you to all of you online for attending. Again, we'll send out the recording and slides to everyone. Absolutely take advantage of OIT career advising as you're going through the process of applying for jobs yourself. You can have lovely one-on-one chats with Brad and our other career advisors. We're here to help you through that process. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you all again, and
Thank
hope
you.
you have a good
Thank
day.
you for attending, and thank you for attending in person, like reading the elements.
Yes.
here.
Brave the elements over here.
And
It is
thank
so
you very
cold.
much for getting me life-saving.
Yes, you're the best. Thank you.
So for the recorded talk and the slides, are those just emailed to us?
Yes.
Then okay, awesome.
Yeah, as long as you send it on the website, everyone will
Okay,
get a copy of the slides and recording.
Yeah,